But let's go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to another installment of the Good Design is Good Business series hosted on DeveloperWorks. Thank you for joining today. I am very pleased to announce that Steve Arnold is our guest speaker today, and he will discuss the top 3 new value features in RSA 8.5 and RAD 8.5 that were just released. And so as we look to serve our very large customer base for RSA and RAD, one of the 2 more popular products in the Rational portfolio, our customers drive a lot of that demand, and we answer with some key capabilities that Steve will talk about, and hopefully, if we have some time, demonstrate a little bit more. My name is Roger Snook. I'm the host for today's call, but you're going to be listening to mostly Steve Arnold, who is a consulting IT specialist out of the UK, also a professional author on DeveloperWorks. And you can reach either one of us at any one of the links shown on this page. The etiquette for today's call, all lines will be hopefully muted, but if you reach a point where you have a question, when we get to the question point, please press *6 on your phone to unmute your line and ask a question, or mute your physical line, unmute your physical line to ask your question. Today's call is being recorded, and we do expect, and this call was advertised as having external callers, that is non-IBMers as well as IBMers. So, and Steve will talk about a disclaimer here on the next slide. But so I welcome you all to this exciting set of topics today. And with that, Steve, I will pass over the baton to you. Thank you for joining me today.
Super. Thank you, Roger. And well, good afternoon or good morning, I guess, depending on where you are. So really the purpose of today's call is to sort of try and go through the top sort of 3 kind of new exciting things really that are coming in RSA 8.5 or come in RSA 8.5 and that have come in RAD 8.5. I'm going to try not to go into big detailed kind of every new feature. So if there's something in there that you sort of were hoping might be in the new release, it may well be in there even if I don't mention it. But if you do have a specific question, obviously feel free to get in touch with me after the call. So I'm obliged to put up this legal notice mainly because one of the things that we're going to talk about is RSA Design Manager. So it's sort of the server-side component of RSA, and that's due for release a little bit later on this quarter. And I'm just obviously placing that up there just so that with the standard disclaimer that things may change. So, what are we really going to talk about over the next 45 minutes or so? Is really the component, sort of the 3 new things that are in RSA and a few quite exciting changes and differences around RAD. And I think one of the interesting things that we're starting to see is that as a brand, and also some of the demands from our customers, is we're starting to look much more at the collaborative aspects of how teams of people actually work together, rather than or as well as really the individual productivity pieces. And I think really that's got a kind of quite an interesting or that's starting to come out of the industry really in a kind of really out of some of the agile practices and around some of the lean pieces. So if you tend to think of your software development approach and you think about the amount of time that a piece of software takes to go through the software, your software development organization and make it into production on the other side, there's quite a lot of industry numbers out there which sort of say that most organizations they're about 20% efficient in that process. So basically, they do for every 20 days work they actually do, it actually takes them 100 days. The actual the physical amount of time is very large compared to the amount of work that's actually done. And so one of the really critical things around the collaboration piece is it allows us to tackle those gaps. So it allows us to make organizations much more efficient and able to deliver software much faster. And so whilst obviously it's very useful and powerful to be able to help a professional actually improve their productivity, that's kind of working in that 20% area. Whereas if we can help teams work better together, then it's a much there's much more waste in that space, and it's potentially much more powerful and much more useful for organizations. So, probably that's why when you look at this list, you start to see a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. Some of the really key, powerful things are really all around collaboration and how teams can work much better together, and how we can really start to improve the efficiency of software teams and allow them to be able to deliver much faster. So with that, really, we're going to dive into the three things really around RSA, which is really saving time, improving the quality with enterprise model reuse, and being able to share models and model elements much more effectively, improve team working, and then also some broader technology support really around Spring and Hibernate, and then we'll come down. Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say, as you transition to the next slide, go ahead and hit star 78, please. That way we can, I'm hearing a little bit of background noise, so.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay, so switch quieter. Perfect. Okay, so let's carry on through the slides, and then I'd also like to show you a couple of these elements. I'll put the software architect family slide in really just really as a point that the packaging hasn't really changed. If anyone was coming at this from a view of the version 7.5 packaging, then obviously we went through a piece a couple of years ago to sort of take the sort of more commoditized pieces of modeling and put that into a sort of foundational layer called software architect, and then really provide different components to provide specific capabilities and functionalities that our customers could buy as and when they needed it. And today we're really going to sort of probably focus predominantly around two of those components, really around Design Manager and the SOA extension. So, what's driven some of the changes and some of the real focus I think that we've had over like the last year and a half really around collaboration in terms of modelling? I think there's a couple of elements to that. One is that the modelling tools that we have today, whether it's Software Architect or Rhapsody, grew out of like single-person desktop products, and the team working is kind of provided, but it was always done as a little bit of an afterthought. So we're trying to come back to that and really try and build something that's aimed specifically at architects to enable them to collaborate with other architects. A second piece of this, which I think is quite critical as well, is really what is the purpose of modelling to some degree. And sure, one purpose is to take the requirements and work our way through down the code and to or work our way down through the various levels of a model and to generate code. But I think critically, and one of the pieces that we often forget about in terms of modelling is it gives us a language and something that we can talk about and communicate around and collaborate around in terms of understanding how an application might work. And it's that ability to be able to look at a model, understand it, and provide feedback and commenting and review that actually can really improve the quality of an application at a very early stage. And it's one of those perhaps softer things that we perhaps don't talk about so much, but actually is very critical, and we're losing that technique in some organisations where they go very agile. So so this really key thing really about being able to collaborate, much like when you produce a document, you might you socialise that document to allow people to review it and to comment on it, and that improves the document. We need something similar for software. And it's very hard to socialise code and get comments on it. It's kind of too late. Whereas a model is something that we can socialise and get value from. So really, the design challenges have started to, and these collaboration challenges for architects and designers are really the things which are driving some of the things we're going to talk about here, and Design Manager in particular. So version 4 of Design Manager really has a set of sort of core themes, really around centralized design repository. So I've got a central point where I can load my models in my organization. And obviously that came in version 3. But some of the real key things that we've got in in version 4 are basically this ability to do a very, very simplified configuration management piece using Design Manager, so without the need of another SCM solution. So Design Manager basically starts to allow us to, it starts to perform the SCM capability for us. And the second piece I think that's also incredibly useful, especially in bigger organizations, is the ability to be able to search and reuse the designs. And I'm really just going to sort of walk through those capabilities now. So the model search and reuse piece becomes very, very simple. So the intent is that teams would load their models into Design Manager, into the repository. Whether that's done using, version 3 or version 4, all techniques in version 3 and 4 doesn't really make any difference. But then when I want to come along and potentially reuse something, and I think really the scenario here is that maybe I want to use a service that is provided by another team, or some component that another team has created that I want to find and reuse, or maybe there's some standard patterns or some standard techniques that I want to find inside my model repository and I want to reuse. Or maybe I just happen to know, I know some projects have worked out how to do some security stuff in kind of a cool way, and how do I find out how they did it? So, from my RSA client, I can effectively go and search the model repository. I can get back a list of matches. I can then navigate from those matches to the Design Explorer, so a client-side view of all the model elements inside the centralized design repository. And then I can start to pick those elements up, and I can just drag them onto my own diagrams. And then I can start to draw relationships to them and use them in whatever way I'd like to. So it becomes very easy for me to start to be able to reuse existing designs. And obviously this is quite, there's also a slight, there's an element of overlap today with potentially using RAM for some of those things. But immediately there starts to be some huge amount of value, because it really simplifies the ability to model and describe, potentially how an organization is working, across many teams and across many applications. Sorry, apologies. And so, this becomes, a very, 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 very simple matter now with Design Manager, and obviously because you can reuse things, and you're going to get all the standard, benefits of, taking less time to build things out, and getting improved quality, because you're not reinventing the wheel all the time. And certainly when I've talked to customers about this kind of capability, then it's very appealing to them, because today this is actually quite hard. Just because you have to, with a standard configuration management tool, this is quite a tricky thing to do.
Yeah, Steve, Shiv Singh actually asked about any support for mobile platforms, and actually one of the threads of the entire mobile development and delivery.
Sorry, say that again?
Yeah, one of the key capabilities around mobile is connection back to the enterprise, and leveraging the information that's in the enterprise. And Design Manager for customers that have done their SOA design or database design or any other design elements that have captured that in Design Manager, then have access to that information for their mobile application development. So it's a good reference book, if you will, for customers moving forward into that mobile space.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, a lot of the mobile space is really kind of, it's often wrapping, isn't it, existing applications or existing technology and making that available on different platforms. And so, yeah, you could start to see some of this reuse capability being really powerful there, because you can have separate teams working on those kind of capabilities, but they can very easily, get in and access the original designs and the original content, for the systems they're trying to build a mobile platform over. Yeah. So there we go. It took me 10 minutes, but that was kind of the first big major piece. And I think the that reusability should be something that's I'm certainly really quite excited about it, and it should be really good. So the second one is really around how does the RSA client interact with the Design Manager server. And in the first release of Design Manager, we still required you to store your models in a configuration management tool. So whether that was RTC or ClearCase or Subversion or whatever you chose to use. And then there was a secondary process called the import engine, which took models out of the configuration management server and loaded them into Design Manager. So there used to be, there's a little bit of a lag between you making a change and that being immediately available on the web for people to go and have a look at, or available on the DM server. And to be honest, this also caused, this required that people, it required that architects actually have to go off and understand an SCM solution. So this works fine, I think, where the architects are also developers, or sort of analyst developer kind of type roles, where they'll be quite used to that sort of a complex configuration management system. But this used to be a bit trickier, I think, when people were more used to just using Visio, and they just wanted something really simple, and they didn't want to have to go through this extra effort of having to learn and get loaded onto their machines and another config management solution. So what we've really done to try and support that is basically build in an element of configuration management into the Design Manager server. So in the new release of Design Manager, we basically have a second mode which allows the RSA clients to talk directly to the server. And in this case, whenever I make a change, I'm directly looking at the server with my RSA client, and I've still got all the usual capabilities I'd have, but as I make my changes, they're being made on the server, but in a kind of, the changes are in a sandbox environment, effectively. And once I've finished making a group of changes, I can then choose to share those with the rest of my team. So I save my model in RSA and it gets saved in a sandbox, and then I choose to share, and those changes are immediately available. And it's a very, very simple and easy to use mode, and obviously gives us some other benefits in terms of the fact that the change sets now against the model are much more granular. So when I start to associate like a work item or task against those changes, I see the exact model elements that were being changed. I don't just see this is the model file that was being modified. So from a kind of a governance and reporting point of view, and understanding exactly what was done, that's also a very big improvement for us. So the intent really here is really around just making it much simpler, much easier, and also having a much finer grained sort of locking control. So again, also you end up with less need to do parallel development, and hence you end up with less time wasted by people waiting for model elements that or bits of model that they can modify. So again, I think this is quite a really nice sort of powerful and simple and easy way for people to actually interact with designs and interact and work as a team using Software Architect. And at this point, I was going to quickly show you a demo.
Hey, Steve Hobart.
Yeah.
Quick question. So for customers who need to do parallel development.
Yep.
Have we thought through that?
Yeah. So the Design Manager team have actually built if you get into the detail behind it, then effectively you can go in and you can. They're kind of using a sort of stream. Well, they're using a sort of something they're calling a workspace, but effectively you can have parallel workspaces, and you can kind of compare and merge and between those workspaces. So it's a sort of slightly similar terminology to the RTC streams, but effectively you could do parallel development.
Do you know if they're planning to write that up as a, canonical type example?
Well, I think what they've done is they've built a new Jazz application called VVC, Version and Variant and Configuration, I think it stands for. And effectively what they've done is they've built a framework that is going to be used as the broader intent, I think, is to use that application for other elements. So I know, like, the requirements team, for instance, are starting to look at how they're going to use VVC, to allow them to do, parallel requirements inside Requirements Composer. And I'm kind of guessing the RQM guys are doing the same. So the longer term, the first place that's going to appear is in the modelling piece, probably because I think it's much more common. But certainly, I know in the UK we've got quite a few customers who end up with parallel requirements just because of length of their releases and things. Mm-hmm. So the intent is for that framework and that component to provide the basis for all the other applications to do their variation pieces.
Very good. Hey, Roger.
Yes, Steve.
That would be a wonderful topic for an additional call, I would suggest.
All right. So you name it, you claim it.
Oh, I'm glad I kept quiet then. Phew.
Oh, Steve, sorry to interrupt, but please.
No, absolutely. I kind of glossed over it just because I didn't want to get into too much depth on it, but yeah, it is there, and it's kind of starting to look okay.
Steve, this is Tom Hill. I'd like to just ask a simple question. No need to go into a detailed answer, but I mean, it appears to me that now Design Manager is either kind of it appears to me that Design Manager is now able to handle most all model configuration management tasks. Is that true?
Yeah. I think that's the intent. Is basically that if you came to us today and said, "We're really interested in modelling," and we've got a team of people, you would buy the Software Architect client license and you would buy a Design Manager license, rather than buying, say, Software Architect and Team Concept.
All right, and then Roger, cover up your ears, but is this capability with Design Manager, this model configuration management, going to be similar for Rhapsody, or do you know?
Yeah. I mean, basically, it's the same componentry for Rhapsody, absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, my background's software architect, so I tend to go down that route. But actually, everything I think we're talking about here in Design Manager is relevant to the Rhapsody release as well. So very quickly, what I've got here is I've actually got a model, this demo model, which is actually hooked up to the server. So basically, this is looking at a model sat inside Design Manager, and I've actually already got a change set going, where I created a new diagram. So over here you can see I've got this change set and you can see the changes that have been made. And what I wanted to do is we're just going to create an interface. And we'll call that credit check, say. And in true demo style and being on a webinar, it's all got shine. It's decided to go a bit slow. Okay. And we'll have a component. I don't really mind what that's called. And we'll just wire that up. So you can now see I've kind of got a couple of elements here. I'm going to just save this. And that's kind of still being saved into my sort of private area. So it'll just flow down into the change set. And then once that's gone into the change set, I can then choose to then share the change set, at which point it then becomes available to everybody else. You can obviously see here that I've got, with this change set, I could go through and I could link, so I could say, I can associate a work item to it, so just like I can with a piece of code. You can see over here the little lock icons, which tell you the things that have been created and that are locked. And at this point, I can just do share with others, and that will rumble through. So you can see that I can just sit there with a very, very simplified way of working. And, that changes now on Design Manager Server. Someone could go on through the web, have a look at it, and basically, interact with it, comment on it, all that kind of good stuff that's already there in Design Manager. And then the second piece that I just wanted to show you was really the reuse piece. I'm not quite sure why I have a red cross somewhere. Reuse example. But anyway. Let's just have a quick new UML model. Okay. And what I want to do here is, you can imagine that I'm coming in as another modeler, someone on another project, and I want to actually go through and find, whether there's some existing credit checking service that I can use. So I can actually now search and say I want to search the design repository, and we're going to search for credit. And basically this has come through and it's found this interface for me. And I can see that I've got this credit check, and I can choose then to show it in the Design Explorer view, which will jump me over here to pick out the element, and I can now just drag that down onto my drawing surface in my local model. And then I could obviously have my own, components, and I can start to interact with it. So we could have a, I'll probably do. So I can have a local component, and I can basically start to have a usage relationship with that element. So you can certainly start to imagine, for an organization where you've got all these different teams of people building out their models and storing it in Design Management Server, actually starting to reuse, these elements from a modeling point of view, but obviously also from a runtime point of view, suddenly it becomes, really simple and really easy to do for people.
Hey, Steve again.
Yep.
So
Hi, sure.
When you did the search and you brought in that component, is that a reference or is that a copy?
That's a reference.
Wow.
That's a reference. So this is just like basically a model in the Design Management Server is no different from like a model in your local workspace, except for the fact that obviously the reference is a unique reference because it's pointing back to the DM server and linking to just one instance of that thing.
Wow.
Cool. And then obviously there's a stack of other really cool stuff around being able to do impact analysis. So now you can imagine you've got all these things wired up. You can now go onto the DM server and start to do an impact analysis and say, hey, who's using my credit check interface? Which components out there are using it?
When you checked that interface into the server, it had a component that was already related to it. Is there a way that you could bring in the interface plus anything else that's related?
Oh, no. You mean basically, can I now go onto here and say, this is dangerous, you see. There aren't too many. If there's any customers on the call, I apologise. I'm about to do something I'd normally never do. And basically, you're saying, can we then do show related elements? I've never tried it.
Sorry.
Yes.
Which on the spot?
No, that's all right. I was kind of suddenly interested. The answer is yes.
Very nice.
Yeah, so very cool.
So I'm assuming by very nice and cool from the last
cool was mine, though. I don't think I count.
Tangible productivity benefits there to help make your jobs easier. Would that be a correct statement? Steve Hovater and the other gentleman that just commented in?
Yeah. No.
Sorry, Roger, I'm muted again. Repeat, please.
Yeah, just by your exclamations, I'm thinking that you're seeing some tangible value there, and I'm just kind of wondering, what kind of value are you seeing in terms of productivity gains? Just guess.
Well, that's the same kind of thing that, customers I've dealt with, they'll have like a reference architecture. And the question then becomes, well, I can implement that reference architecture by having a project that everybody includes. But if I have it sitting in a repository, it seems like it's a whole lot cleaner.
Yeah. And I think we're going to certainly see that when we start to, I haven't really started getting around it yet, but all the kind of industry models and all that kind of stuff, it starts to become quite interesting. Perhaps loading, some of the industry frameworks into Design Manager and using that as the basis for people to use on their projects. Absolutely, I think it starts to become quite powerful.
There's also, as you mentioned before, the possibility. Okay, I see this, high-level component or interface or something that's in there, and I can use it. But then I can also dig in and see, okay, now how did they actually go about and implement that?
Yeah, so either how someone else implemented it, or if I own it and I want to change it, I can start to actually get at the people who have, who are dependent on me. Yeah, both of which are, certainly, I think for a lot of organisations who have gone down the SOA route, some of this stuff is, is really hard for them if they haven't invested in some kind of, repository like RAM to manage it. They're trying to do this kind of thing in spreadsheets, and it's, it's very, very difficult.
Hey, great. Thank you, guys. Steve, you got about a half an hour left.
I know. See, I'm rubbish at this kind of thing. Sometimes I should have practiced more. Right. Let me just go through, and we sort of overrun a little bit, but let me just whiz through some of the RSA features, or the final RSA feature. So we've talked about the simplified team working. So probably the next big thing I think for me really is really around framework. So moving away from the kind of whole collaboration piece, but really just broadening out the technology support that RSA supports. So basically we've got Spring, Hibernate, and Struts 2 support in RSA 8.5. And again, I think we've done a very nice job of this in the sense of it's very complete. There's template models. You can see there that the palette entry, has an awful lot of capabilities on it. The Product Explorer has been wired to understand, Spring models, and also there's a lot of extra property sheets and information that's supported. So again, there's really a wealth of framework in here. I've got some slides and some screenshots because I wasn't going to demo this particular piece. Another key ability here is obviously the model view controller piece of Spring. So the Spring user interface, control basically can be modeled in an activity diagram, and then when that's generated, it generates all the appropriate Spring configuration for you. And this is something that we see similar also in the Struts piece. So the Spring model transformation is mainly just an extension of the Java. Of the UML to Java transformation, but say it pulls in the activity diagrams. And then, the Hibernate support. Hibernate support is both ways, so forward and reverse transformations. And, basically it is kind of an extension of the JPA transformation, fundamentally. But again, it goes through and it generates the annotated Java classes for you and any configuration files that are needed. And again, we've really just got a set of extra tool palettes and right-click menu options and properties to be able to do this. Oops, that's a few too many of those. And then finally, also Struts 2 has also been, it's basically been added. So again, it's a similar concept really to the Spring MVC. We've added palette entries to support, just drag and drop and creation of elements. And then we've also added activity diagrams, for basically modeling the actual navigation flow. And both those things, when you do the forward generation, are picked up in terms of the generation. So picked up and the appropriate classes are generated and the appropriate XML configuration is generated. So I don't want to quickly go through those. So really, I mean, from the transformation point, from the Hibernate and Spring and Struts transformation point of view, this is really just around sort of providing broader support for organisations and teams. So where we've predominantly been, JEE focused, that's fine for some organisations who, that's their standard as well. But I think, having the Spring and the Hibernate support, which is pretty common out in the world. Certainly in a lot of smaller organisations that I work with, they would have some sort of Spring and Hibernate around somewhere. Then this just makes RSA more useful and more helpful to those organisations. So it allows them to sort of provide a better documentation, as we talked about earlier, to be able to collaborate and talk more about and discuss how their applications are actually going to fit together and work.
And those shops tend to also have a lot of open source initiatives.
Yeah.
Use those. So for shops that do have that, oddly enough, RAD and RSA still are pretty strong contenders in that space because of that value add that we provide against open source, or on top of open source, really. I did post in the chat the entire list from DeveloperWorks of features, so maybe in the interest of time, you don't have to go through those elements.
Yeah, I was just gonna move on actually. So there's a list there. Please have a look at the article. But there's some kind of interesting and fun things in there. We can do questions. At that point, does anyone have any questions actually? If you want to unmute their phone with *6. If not, I'll dive into the RAD piece.
Hi, Steve. This is Ron. Can you elaborate a little bit on the MQ features that RSA 8.5 has?
Okay. Yes, this is really MQ support in deployment topologies. Yeah. What it really was, I think, just that the support in version 8 just lacked a lot of depth. So it lacked some of the depth that was required. So if you really wanted to model out your exact kind of, all the details and all the information, around your MQ setup, there wasn't really enough detail there. So they kind of just went back to the drawing board a bit with it, and they started to build that out. It's also been, they're working with a partner in the UK called Midvision to actually do some kind of reverse engineering support and things like that. So I've seen some quite cool things where you take your MQ definition file and you just sort of import it into RSA, and we'll kind of explode that out for you into a deployment topology. So
this is great. This is something we had been looking at for quite some time, and we started the discussion with Hursley Labs and Rasher folks as well. Do you know who from Hursley Labs is actually involved with this effort?
So it's not really being led from the labs. It's basically it's a partner and basically the deployment planning team. So Michael Elder and co. But yeah, if you want to hook up with me, feel free to ping me. I think it's probably let's have a chat about it afterwards if that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'll schedule a call with you most likely tomorrow if you're.
Yeah, sure. I'm about tomorrow. Yeah, give me a shout.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Lovely.
Hey, I had a quick question on the Spring Hibernate support. Do we have a fully worked example that shows RSA going through into a RAD and WAS deployment? Because when I talk to the Websphere team, there's questions whether it's even supported in current versions of WAS, and I don't know if we're tied off with those guys. Example.
I don't think so. I think generally, the RAD support for Spring is, there isn't anything, mega, and, there's no specific support inside RAD for Spring anyway. So, we've got some worked examples of models that you can, and how to generate. I don't think we've taken it all the way through, in terms of the steps that you then use to kind of go through and deploy it and get that running. So I'm kind of assuming that it's reasonably well performed.
So I'm looking at a movie. There's a movie for round trip engineering, but I'm not sure if that's on that wiki. But I'm not sure if that has what you're looking for. So.
Because you kind of want to go the next step, don't you? And then say, well, how do you then work that out and then deploy it out to the Websphere runtimes and all that kind of thing? Is that what you're asking for?
Absolutely, yeah. Because we're
I've not seen
different customer bases here, right? So our Websphere partners are saying that they rather that folks go with JPA and some of the J2E standards, and there's a lot of customers out there that obviously you're responding to that with RSA support. for Spring and Hibernate, but it'd be great if we had a common story here and could show an example.
Yeah, I think in terms of obviously runtime is fine. I think probably in terms of tooling support, I would probably still recommend that people look at perhaps RSA in combination with, say, the actual Spring tooling from Eclipse. I know quite a lot of customers who use that anyway. For the actual development of the actual Spring application. So, because as you say, RAD and the RAD team is very much focused really around the Java standard as their predominant technology they support. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So, what's new in RAD? So, obviously, this time around, the RAD 8.5 release has been synchronized with the Websphere release. So, if you've been following any of that, and there's been a big splash really around something called Liberty, which is basically a configuration of the Websphere 8.5 with a much lighter. It's the same. Fundamentally, it's the same engine, but it's using OSGI to actually only load in the appropriate elements that are needed. So you end up with a much smaller runtime, and hence it loads much faster. So as we'll go through, and I'll show you in a little bit, but the Liberty itself loads in a few seconds, or the application server will start in a few seconds. So from a development point of view, there's a huge time saving here, not having to wait for the application server to start. And so, the ability to be able to quickly deploy, be able to start that up and verify your application, absolutely great. Really, but with the added benefit that because you're using Liberty, you are actually using the proper WebSphere runtime. So something that works and behaves on Liberty, or on the Liberty profile for the Websphere App Server, then that will, you can guarantee that if you then go on and deploy that onto a fully fledged Websphere Application Server, then it will work properly. The next piece is really that we've formalized, the web page designer that was in, that kind of came in as a beta in kind of RAD 8, is now a fully fledged, component. And this is really aimed for people doing, rich internet applications. So people who are using a lot of JavaScript, a lot of, Dojo or any other sort of JavaScript-based framework. The previous web page editor, sort of struggled to render those things in design mode. So what the new web page designer does is it's a combination between a page designer, but it's also using the engine of some of the browsers to actually render the page up for you. So you get a much richer experience in very, very nice WYSIWYG view, even when you're building out those sort of complex rich web pages. And then finally, the third piece is really just looking at improving quality through teamwork. And most of the elements have sort of have dribbled through in the various RAD 8.0x releases, but I just wanted to, there's a couple of pieces in there that I really like, so I just wanted to sort of pull that through and give that a bit of visibility to people. So the first piece here is really just around the fact that we've, a bit like with RSA, I thought it would be useful to just actually talk about the various variations of RAD. It's been a little bit confusing, I guess, over the last year, because we've had RAD SE, we've had the Websphere Application Server Toolkit, and we've had Eclipse. There's been a few different kind of things floating around. And really what we've done is we've just simplified that out, and we've just said, okay, we've got basic Eclipse, then we have something called WAS Developer Tools, which is kind of equivalent to the old, Websphere Application Server Toolkit. Plus, we've taken some elements of RAD and put those in there, mainly around the web, building out web pages. And that's either free or you can pay for support for it, but it's a fairly minimal cost. And then we have the fully paid RAD offering, which is kind of really more looking at, the comprehensive tooling and looking certainly at some of the, more or less sort of freely available technologies, things like SCA, some of the nice things from the rational point of view, like, visualization and the integrations with Team Concert, that kind of thing. Integrations out with things like the cloud, so being able to, run your applications, out in a server in the cloud, that kind of thing. So again, the more advanced capabilities are the ones that are paid for, rather than the ones that have perhaps been more commoditized. So the things we're going to talk about today are kind of really in a mixture between those two products. So Liberty. So basically, it's a, the intent is basically to create a very, very simple, very, very fast, runtime that applications, can be deployed into. And, it's a very, very small footprint. You can just go and download it from the, there's a website called WASDev, so wasdev.net. You can just go and download the Liberty runtime. So if no licensing involved. When you run it, less than 5 seconds. I'm sort of, generally speaking, getting a couple of seconds startup, which compared to an old WAS startup, which could easily be a minute, is really powerful. If you think a developer may have to restart their application server every time they make a few changes, or certainly if they make more significant changes, then being able to have this really, really fast restart can save a huge amount of time. So, and also the critical thing is the fact that you can do development and testing on WAS Liberty and then move it forward into sort of full WAS as you go along. So this is kind of really a reflection of what's going on. So how have they managed to make it so quick and so fast? What they've done is they've used OSGI, which is starting to come into the application servers to allow them to choose which bits of WAS to actually load. So depending on the thing that you're trying to run, you basically choose which piece of technology you want to load into the profile. And so hence you can have a much a very, very slimmed down application server that's just loaded in the things that are specific to the application that you're building. And that's kind of how they get these these massively reduced times. So the Liberty stuff absolutely should help developers save a lot of time if they're developing for the Websphere runtimes, because they'll save all this time that they would normally spend in server restarts. So the next piece is really the rich page editor. So a couple of things here really. So this is really for people who are building, say, Dojo or JavaScript applications. And you can see here in the graphic that you've got things like the Dojo layouts. You can see that you've got the various tabs down the side, and you've got tabs running across the element in the middle. And all this is you're able to design this in a very WYSIWYG kind of fashion. So it becomes very straightforward. And the way the tool works, it actually uses a browser runtime to actually help render out this, render out the page. And so again, you've got a multiple browser preview, so that's been extended from just being able to do two to be able to see what this page looks like in the various different browsers. You've got drag and drop, so you can really very carefully position where that goes, but also you've got things like the code views for doing that as well. And down in the right-hand side, you've kind of got the property view. So standard stuff, but just because of the changes in the technology, the old page editor wasn't quite up to it, so we've really redeveloped that and invested quite a lot of time into getting this right. And certainly my initial experience of this is it's a very, very nice experience for building out rich web pages. If I've got time, I'll quickly show you something. But and then tying into the mobile piece, which Roger was talking about earlier on, is that once you've got your web pages, whether they're rich or just sort of standard HTML, then obviously we can also go through and and simulate what those look like on various devices. So you can go and say, what does it look like on an iPhone or an iPad, or and there's a whole stack of devices in there that we can try and render out onto. So again, this is all around trying to help teams make sure that what they're building is going to work, especially if they're building particularly mobile versions of an existing web page, say, for instance.
Yeah, and this is exciting stuff for the mobile web browser types of applications.
Yeah.
And I did post, I think I posted a little something earlier about other support for hybrid applications. So I guess I didn't point that out specifically, but the Worklight IDE actually is going to be bundled in the 8.5 release to allow our customers to develop and test for applications that take advantage of more of the native phone capabilities, such as the camera, integrated camera, or GPS capability. What you're seeing here is just basically running a browser-based app on the phone without those fancy features.
Yeah, but again, it's just trying to. It's the first step, isn't it? I think of going, well, I've got an existing web page. How do I kind of make that more consumable to sort of mobile devices? And then this is a really good way of just checking that what you've built will actually render nicely and appropriately.
Cool. Thank you.
And then kind of one of my pet topics, mainly because I browbeated the development team into doing it. So, is really around kind of the code coverage pieces, and these dribbled into RAD, really over the last sort of year and a half. But basically what we've done is we've said, okay, probably from a development point of view, probably quite a major metric that you might want to measure is actually the amount of code coverage that you're getting. And we might want to integrate that in a number of ways. At a very, very simple level, we might just want to integrate it into the build so that as an RTC build kicks off, it can make use of the RAD code coverage engine and basically generate coverage for any tests that you're running as part of that build, and basically post those results back to the build record and allow you to go in and download them from the build into your environment to kind of understand where the gaps are. So this is all around trying to actually improve the quality of the code that's being built. The second piece, which I think is quite useful, especially if you've got agile teams, is that there's actually a check-in advisor now inside RTC to allow you to, when you've got RTC in RAD, to allow you to specify a certain level of code coverage, and we can limit that on a particular component or particular stream, and you can sort of switch certain classes on and off and that kind of thing. But fundamentally, you can ensure that your development team, before they can check in a piece of code, is that they have to have a certain level of code coverage being reported from RAD before that piece of code can be delivered. So for people who are doing agile and basically they're not doing design, but instead of that they're doing unit testing, then this is a really great way of making sure that they're keeping their code coverage levels up. It's also a really great way if you've got a legacy code base and you want to improve it over time. Then quite a common thing that you might do is you might say, well, when you touch a piece of code, you're basically you're responsible for writing a unit test for it and getting a certain level of code coverage on it. So over time, as changes are made, you'd start to build up a sort of a test suite against the legacy code base. And so RTC can actually enforce that for you, and you might set it at a very low level, but over time potentially increase the percentages that are required. So I think this is a really nice combination of really trying to help development teams improve the coverage and the quality of the code that they're building. And certainly it's done from day one. It could be really helpful in terms of making sure that people have got good quality code and it stays good quality. So certainly some of the challenges I hear from people are either they've had unit tests once but they don't work anymore, that kind of thing. Well, this approach means that you have to keep all those things up to date, and the tools would actually help you to enforce that and to maintain a kind of high level of professionalism.
Steve, do you know whether or not these code coverage is reportable?
It's a real pain. No. So what I would love to be able to do is to be able to effectively store the code coverage value into the build record and then be able to trend across it. But at the moment, the build records aren't so flexible to allow you to have kind of custom fields. So there is a enhancement request out there on Jazz.net for it. So if you can find a customer who really likes it, who would really need it, that would be great, because we can kind of probably do with a bit of help to push that through. But I know it's something they're quite keen to do, I think. So, and it may be that things like this, the continuous delivery, the smart cloud continuous delivery stuff may actually force some of those changes to happen anyway. So. But yeah, so at the moment, no, it's not so easy to report on. It kind of, you could do it, but it's a little bit of work to do in terms of building out Eclipse plugins and stuff like that. So you have to extend RTC on the server side.
Already. Yeah,
that's kind of where I got to. But there's certainly a move to basically make the build record a bit more flexible. It's not just for this, but it's really for anything that you might want to report on, because you could imagine that you might want to, if you were running, static analysis as part of the build, it's fine. One thing, we can store the results, but really you want to be able to store a number in there so that you can trend across that number. Yeah, so it's kind of not there, but we know about it, and hopefully it's coming.
All right, thank you.
And I've kind of run out of time. I did have a very short demo, which was really just to show you the Liberty stuff. But if you've got RAD, it's just a quick 10-minute thing just to download it and have a little play. But it's really quite impressive. You can build out a web page, deploy it in seconds. So it's really, really powerful, really productive. So. So really, from a RAD side, I think it's, all those things should really help, I think, the development community that we have. It's, the Liberty profile absolutely will save people stacks of time, I think, compared to, their existing practices, developing for Websphere. The web page designer, if they're building out rich web user interfaces, again, really, really nice, and there's nothing really out there that does exactly that. So, people will be writing writing lots of code at the moment and lots of JavaScript, and we can really give people a good head start on that. And then this third piece really around kind of having better team support and better process support from RTC and RAD to actually really help teams improve the quality as they're going along, and obviously with the commensurate reduction in sort of rework and defects and that kind of stuff. And then finally, next steps. So, oops, page down doesn't work. So basically, RSA or RAD, you can go and download. You can try online in our sandbox. I've just listed out, the main landing pages for RSA and RAD. There's also a bit of blatant promotion on my side. There's an RSA article out there that I wrote about the new features of RSA 8.5. So if there's some bits on there that I didn't get into that you're interested in, then please go and have a look at that. And then also, the next webinar, from Good Design is Good Business. So we're going to really dive down into Design Manager in a lot more depth. So that's being led by Jean-Louis. And there we go, I'm done. So any questions? I took exactly an hour. Amazing.
Excellent, Steve. Thank you. We'll take a brief moment for questions, please. Number *6 to unmute. And Steve, I'm just going to regain the presenter. Go back.
Sure.
Going once. Twice. So thank you, Steve. Excellent presentation today, learning about some of the key new valuable features for RSA and RAD, things that our customers have been asking for and we've delivered upon. So really appreciate your leadership in presenting that today. And for those attending, this concludes the call. And again, August 2nd, I believe, during the East Coast lunchtime hour, So it'll be just the evening hour in the UK, or a little bit more earlier in the morning for our West Coast U.S. Attendees. But that will be a little bit more on Design Manager with Jean-Louis. So we look forward to having you there. And again, invitations will go out for that soon. Thank you all for attending. Have a great day.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Take care.